Hi, folks. Steven here. This is going to be another one of our discussions of music from Pokemon side games. I'm here with Anne from Pikapi Podcast. And so we've got a few things to cover here, but we're giving folks a little bit of time to drop in here. And why don't you say where are you at on your podcast then?
All right, so Pikapi Podcast just dropped a new episode. We're still in Hoenn. It's been a while. It will continue to be a while, but Ash is currently making his way ever closer to a Groudon, although he doesn't know that, and technically speaking, the audience doesn't if they lived back in the early aughts. But we all know. So that's about where we're at. We just found a Clamperl and the return of Spoink, but we are getting ever closer to that big old two-parter.
And I think I know which episode. I think I used some of that when I was doing my upscaling model. I used some stuff from that episode or thereabouts. So I'm actually kind of familiar with it now that I think about it. So other news in the Pokemon world, or at least specifically the musical world, is that earlier this week, the second set of episodes for Pokemon Concierge came out, and that has a new single. It's a different focus than the first one. This one is more about settling in, I guess. I'm not sure exactly, but it has it's more Japanese than the other one. Although there are a few English words, notably island, strewn about there. And do you know anything about the person who's behind it?
Yes, he is Tatsuro Yamashita. He is actually Maria Takeuchi's husband, who did the first theme song for Pokemon Concierge. Yeah, they are basically a city pop power couple, the two of them. But he's just got a great long history of Japanese city pop and creating music in Japan since the 80s. In fact, his song Christmas Eve is one of the best-selling Japanese singles of the 80s. And in fact, it's been covered so many times with English lyrics by like common US artists as well. And he's collaborated with Alan O'Day as well, a American singer-songwriter. So like, he's just got a very long career. There is like a downer note on that in that there was some a company policy for Smile Company that they work for, slash, I believe he co-founded, if I'm not mistaken, during the somewhat famous Johnny's Entertainment, Johnny Kitagawa's sexual harassment stuff was going down. One of their artists under that company spoke out, and there was kind of some back and forth, and that guy eventually got fired for speaking out about the sexual harassment allegations. And it's all very nasty and definitely maybe worth looking into on your own time. I don't know.
Yeah, that's not the kind of stuff that we usually not to dismiss it entirely, but it's not usually the focus of our stuff.
It's not the focus here, but
make your own decision there.
Before I pretend he is the world's greatest person,
okay,
you might want to look into that. But
all right, well, let's see. So that was one of the big ones there. As far as I have watched through all 4 episodes last night and has not gotten a chance, from what I understand.
No, as far as like, I definitely need some Haru in my life right now.
Yeah, there's definitely some people. It's definitely a continuation. There's a few new characters and whatnot. But as far as the score goes, there's more game music in there. Although I think that might have come at the expense of some of the more unique stuff that was created for the show that we saw more of in the first 4 episodes. Obviously the arrangements are done fairly well. I know there's one of the Follow Me theme, and there's a battle theme from one of the things there. I think there's a couple others, but I do feel it's a bit of maybe a false choice if you can say, I think we can have some more original score elements as well as stuff from other parts of the franchise. I think the Detective Pikachu, the movie, I think did that fairly okay. It didn't have that much from the games, to be honest, but that may be something we talk about at some point. But in any case, all right. Well, I think with that being said, I kind of hoped we would be having a little more music news at this point. Last month I was at Worlds in Anaheim. I was able to be there for the weekend. I had a 1 day spectator pass, but I managed to get. I have a Gyarados figure, and I have to figure out what I'm doing with because I won that drawing.
Woohoo!
Part of me really wanted the jukebox until I found out I got there, and there's has an AM/FM radio and a CD player, and that apparently is it. So the only way to get music from outside into it is to burn a CD or use like an FM, one of those car FM transmitter type deals, and use that. It does not have an aux in, does not seem to have Bluetooth, does not. I don't think it even has a headphone jack, so I don't think you can attach external speakers either if you want to do that or use headphones. That doesn't seem to be a thing either. So a little under-featured there. I'm sure it was like the actual electronics in it were sort of a base thing that they got. But otherwise, I had a pretty good time there. Did some shopping on Sunday to sort of get that squared away. While I was waiting there, a lot of fun announcements. This time they did announce something about the upcoming game, unlike last year. They did announce some stuff about ZA.
Nice.
Yeah, I think the theory that might be going around is they didn't intend to announce ZA until last year's Worlds, but they ended up moving it up to Pokemon Day. Might have been what happened there. But I did play the demo. It was fine. It's got a lot of stuff from Legends Arceus, it seems. Overworld poison damage is back. I noticed that. If you put your Pokemon back in its Pokeball, then it'll stop taking damage. But
shoot. Cannot tell you how many times that would have affected me.
So that's something a little bit different this time around. Not a guarantee it'll be in the final game, but pretty likely. So that was a good time there. I wish I had had time to write the full report, but also last month I did cover the Pokemon, the Mad X convention here in Madison for the weekend, and that was nice. I got 2 interviews. They're both on the podcast feed as part of our latest episode talking about Pokken Tournament. If you want to check those out, but I got an interview with Lisa Ortiz, the director of the dub for the last 7 or 8 years. And then I also interviewed one of the winners of the Smash Bros. Tournament. You've seen him in written form earlier, but I got to talk about him, his significant other running a shop there. So that was kind of fun. But what we're actually here to do tonight is to talk about the music of Detective Pikachu, the game. Now, if you want to know what we thought about the movie, we recorded that a week or two after the movie came out back in 2019. So we covered the movie more or less in time there. That's a little bit easier with linear media sometimes. That's one reason, like in early 2024, we were able to do a relatively quick turnaround on the Pokemon Concierge. But for these games, those can take a little bit longer, as this one has. So I also had a little bit of a different angle you might have noticed, folks at home. Let me know how that one goes for you. But I think, Anne, are you ready to get started?
I am ready.
Okay, let me go ahead and... There we go. So leave a little bit of a pause, and then we'll kind of go from there. Try to bring up my notes. Find the
I don't know why I'm preparing for a fight.
All right. Hi, I'm Stephen Reich here at the PokePark Studios in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm on the phone with Anne from Pikapi Podcast, and we're continuing our march through the music of the Pokemon side games, and we have now reached Detective Pikachu, the game, the 3DS game, the first one in that series. So this one has kind of an interesting history because it was originally released in Japan in 2016 in a couple of episodes, which I think is only part of the game that was eventually released worldwide in... let me redo that. So this game has a bit of an interesting release history. In Japan, it was released back in 2016, at least the first couple parts of it, in February. And then a couple years later, in 2018, March, is when it came out worldwide, which I guess technically the first part of the story there. I think by that point, the movie had been greenlit, and we will definitely be doing some comparisons to that in our gameplay discussion, because there are some significant differences. But I'm trying to remember what the exact, I know I remember hearing about the Japanese one. Of course, I had a Japanese, I still do, 3DS that I could technically have played on. I just think the language barrier with a text-heavy game like that by Pokemon standards was probably more than I wanted to do.
A challenge,
And
for sure.
I
Yeah.
don't know if did you put yourself up to that, or did you wait for the worldwide release, or how did all that work for you?
I certainly waited for the worldwide release. I don't think I was even aware of its existence until the worldwide release. Although I have a goal of taking the N2 someday. So or is it the N2? So this might be a challenge that's up my alley, a text heavy, fully Japanese game. But yeah, it was only the first 3 chapters that were released in that original Japanese release, right?
I think that's about right. Without having, unfortunately, there's no way for me to get it right now because the eShop is
Yeah.
closed. Speaking of which, I did not play this game before the movie came out. So I was well aware of it, but I never really got around to it. However, I did make sure, since we had already started this side game discussion series, before the eShop stopped allowing purchases, I made sure to purchase a copy of this game so that I would have it for here without having to find a used copy, which probably isn't actually that hard to find. But yeah, so I've been playing through it actually quite recently. Within the last few weeks, I got through the entire main campaign. So that's basically my experience with that. So Anne is ahead of me for once. In any event, this is sort of a spiritual successor to the PokePark games in that it's handled by creatures, just like those were. And it has Takuto Kitsuda, who we have heard on a number of other things, and I believe he also works on the sequel to this game, Detective Pikachu Returns to the Switch, that we'll talk about at some point.
Yeah, no, he has a nice long Pokemon sound designing and composing history.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was working on whatever creatures is planning on putting out next in the next few years or whatever. Since that Returns game did come out in 2023, it's been a little while, so I'm sure they've moved on to something else. As far as an overall style for this game, it's kind of hard to pin down. Like, it does share some elements, particularly with the PokePark games, which makes a lot of sense. But I wouldn't, like, all the music is, we'll talk as more as we go on. There's kind of a couple different buckets it goes into, and some of it is location based. Some of it is situational. A lot of the cutscene music is like that. But it would be hard for me to put down a specific style. Anne, do you think that's kind of fair?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. There's definitely a few through lines that we can point out from song to song, and we will, but there's not one overall vibe that I'm getting from any of these. Yeah.
Well, be that as it may, we did do what we usually do. We picked out 6 tracks, 3 for each of us to talk about here. Let's see. I picked out, not sure on all the names of these. I don't remember if there's a sound testing game, but a lot of these aren't even said there. So we got Capucci Island, multiple variations of that. Not sure if I got the island name right there. Pan Sage and Auction Hall are my picks. And what were your picks?
I picked The Litwit Cave, Talking to Mewtwo, and Stop Keith, Chapter 6.
Yeah, Keith is obviously a reoccurring character that you would not be familiar with from the movie, actually. He's definitely a major player in this game that we find out about. But we kind of like to go roughly in game order, and this game is actually very, very chaptered, I guess. I don't know. Sorry if that has some other terminology meaning out there, but basically, very linear type of game.
Yeah,
And as
very
such, and as such, we
cave-centric.
had a very clear path here. But the first one is Litwick Cave, which is actually chapter 2. And what kind of stuck out to you about this one?
Yes, so the Litwit Cave, it just has all the spooky ghost vibes. So the song has a very minimal orchestration, like it's got a few droning synths and echoes, and then just like some synth stabs to ratchet up the tension. Very creepy. And then as the song goes on, like you get a little bit more from every instrument, like a few more synth stab, a few more overarching synths, like a few more strange clatters or tapping in the background. But it's just, yeah, it just has a feeling of tension and a little bit of playfulness to that tension, unlike another track that I'll talk about later,
Hmm.
but certainly eeriness.
Yeah, so I put down, yeah, echoing pluck strings and ambient synths. I think this is an early chapter. I suppose it maybe doesn't need to have the most complicated thing, but um, you're gonna draw some conclusions about what Ann and I thought about the music of this game. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but there were definitely some tracks that gave us more to talk about than others. I'm not sure I have a whole lot else to say about it. I mean, yes, it does fit a cave in that it is very open and stuff like that. Anything else, Anne, on this one?
Well, I would point out there's not a lot to say about it because, again, it's a very minimalist track. But at the same time, I specifically chose it and one other track I'll talk about it for the minimalist setup because there's not a lot happening, but it makes incredible use of space and silence. And, like, I mean, it's never fully silent, but the space between notes and the lack of doing things at times perfect on this track. So,
Mm,
like I said, it's not much I can say about it because it's not doing an incredible lot of things, but it's well placed every single note.
I suppose. I mean, there are definitely more interesting, like from a radio perspective, cave themes, but I'm not going to say this is a bad song. It definitely works for what they were trying to do there.
Hmm.
Um, let's move on to my first pick. This is Capucci Island. I don't know if it's pronounced like Gucci because it is kind of spelled like that. But there's a couple different versions of this. This is sort of this is chapter 4. This is the tropical island setting that I guess is within a relatively short boat ride from Rhyme City in this game. And it has a lot of the typical stuff. It has a tropical guitar slash steel drum sort of beat to it. Um, Very much in line, say, with the beach area in the PokePark games, although
Mhm.
it is unique. One of the more interesting things I thought about this is there's a couple different variations. There's at least 3 different versions depending on if you're nearer to the beach, if you're further inland, or if you're on the quote unquote secret path. But before I talk any more about it, Anne, what did you notice about this one?
Well, it was a little hard to know which version I listened to, but mine had a flute part that came in a few rounds in, and it was delightful. I am living for that flute. And I just thought the whole track was just groovy. Like it just has a nice vibe to it.
Yeah, definitely one of the more pleasant ones. Like I said, the Secret Path, that one has more of a mysterious quality. I think
Okay.
Variation 2 has more of a indoors quality. I'm not sure. You're not
Mhm.
actually indoors at that point, I think. Not entirely sure, but you sort of get the idea there.
Yeah.
But I think it covers, this place that is, like I said, it's not, can't be that far because they take like a motorboat to get there from Rhyme City's port. So it can't be that far away, but it is sort of separate from a lot of the other stuff. All right. Well, one thing this game has and is featured in our next one. Our next one is Stop Keith Chapter 6, as opposed to you do see him again and
Yes.
again. But in any case, this game has quick time sequences where you have to do button presses um, based on an indicator that shows up on there, and so on and so forth. And this is one of those sequences. So, Anne, tell us a little bit about this track.
Well, it's so crunchy. It's glitch pop. It's basically Tron meets glitch mob. Like That's the vibe. There's lots of flanging. There's this grunge percussion. Eventually, a sort of chippy synth comes in. There's not really a melody. It's all beat. And there's just such crunchy sound effects going on to drive that. It really is like my glitch trap house music that I love this track. I don't think we've heard anything quite like it in our covering of all the Pokemon music so far. So I applaud them for including it.
Yeah, it does bear a resemblance, of course, to the other quick time events sequences in the game, and we'll talk more about those during our game discussion. But yeah, this one I put down industrial and electronic, which is a pretty good description of most of these. Basically, what will happen is it'll give you sort of a sequence. It'll open up with it, and then it'll periodically give you a place where you have to press usually the A button. They're not super complex. They're not like, they could have done multi-button sequences and stuff like that, like you sometimes see in games and so on and so forth. These are relatively simplistic, where you either have to press at a certain time or mash the button or something like that. But it sort of works. I mean, with that, if they're sometimes with these sequences, there can be a rhythm to them, and they'll sometimes try to incorporate that into the music. But I think, Anne, you gave a pretty good description there. Any other thoughts you wanted to put in?
Please do more like this, Pokemon. This is my young grunge heart calling out to you.
All right. Well, let's talk about my second pick. This is called Pansage. Reminder that these are not necessarily totally official track names, but this is a cutscene, a non-interactive cutscene in Chapter 7, where you come across this Pansage that is carrying around some laundry or whatever that it is apparently in charge of. We may talk more about that, but to be honest, I actually found a lot of the cutscene ones, because they are timed directly to the actions that are appearing on screen. I think they were able to do something a little more, in step or to be honest, kind of more interesting here. This one happens to be a jazzy piano interlude, and one of the words I came up with is clumsy, which makes sense if you've seen this scene. And what were your observations?
Well, yeah, jazzy nightclub, and then at some point it feels kind of more saloon vibes. It's got just kind of that honky tonk piano vibe in some of the melody. So it's I was very confused. It's which vibe are we going for here? And what does this have to do with Pansage and his laundry?
Yeah, but no, if you've seen the scene, the flow of the song, it's only about 20 or 30 seconds, as most of these cutscene ones are. But it does work for it. And I did find it interesting enough to toss in there. Also, of course, I am a defender of the elemental monkeys. We're recording this just after the second set of concierge episodes came out, and they're featured in there as well. I tend to think they just don't have as many staunch defenders out there, and that allows the people who really find them middling to negative to really dominate the discussion there.
Silent Crescent Chili are grateful for your support.
Yeah. In any case, let's go on to my third pick. This is Auction Hall. This is a tune from Chapter 8. So just to explain a little bit about this, at a certain point in the game, there's you're on a cruise ship actually, and turns out there's sort of a black market auction. I'm sure this has some basis in history. Stuff like this has and quite possibly is still happening. But in any case, you work your way into an auction setting, and they have these items that you're going to be able to peruse that are up for bid, including the sort of MacGuffin of this game, the R. And this one has a kind of what you might expect given the dollar amounts that are involved in this segment of the game. There's some strings with some rather menacing undertones. There's a harpsichord. I sort of came up with the phrase dark high society.
Ooh.
Because there's all these artifacts of dubious origin that are being shown at the auction, and so on and so forth. And did you have similar thoughts, or?
Well, it kind of felt to me like we were sort of slowly moving through different sections of the orchestra, because it kind of starts with these woodwind sounds, and then there's all those snaps, and then like the violins comes in with violin stabs, and it kind of just goes through different sections of the orchestra as it builds its score. But very orchestra is kind of associated with higher class, high society, and certainly there's like attention to the whole proceeding.
Yeah, and I suspect another reason why this one, for some of the area themes, why this one might be a little more elaborate, at least, or have a longer duration, or something of that nature. It's hard to say exactly. Is just because you do spend a fair amount of time in this setting talking to the NPCs and examining some of the items that are up for bid. And taking a look there and sort of planning out your strategy for the actual auction. Like I said, we may talk more about this because it's an interesting scene that's just doesn't have any equivalent in the movie, for probably some, whatever reason. But why don't you go on to Anne, your third pick? This is Talking to Mewtwo. So just like I said, I'm sure some folks here are more familiar with the movie than the game, but Mewtwo is in this one just like it's in the movie. What sort of stuck out to you on this one?
So I firmly believe that every encounter with Mewtwo should feel a bit like you're taking your life into your hands, and that is true of this track as well. It is very eerie. It is, again, very minimalist, which is kind of one of the reasons I picked it, because this track made incredible use of spacing. Like, it is slow and it is deliberate. Every stroke of the gentle high piano, every like synth undertone, everything is just placed so deliberately, and there's like long pauses before another note hits. It's expert. And it eventually, in the track, of a sweet-ish melody comes in. Like, the harmony is really quite particular in that, like, it stays eerie all the way through and never quite resolves, which is, again, literally every time this Pokemon has ever showed up, that we have never resolved its emotional state. But yeah, it's just very gentle, high piano, and just every note in that melody, the places where music comes back in and drifts back out, is just so slow and deliberate and purposeful and unsettling in a sweet way. Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely knew who they were scoring for.
Yeah.
I don't think this game specifically states, like in the Detective Pikachu movie, I know they specifically say it's from the Kanto region, not necessarily the first movie, but like the Kanto region. So I don't know if it has technically the same backstory, but definitely sort of given the plot of the game and whatnot, I think it totally fits in there for this cutscene that is mostly a discussion between Detective Pikachu and Mewtwo. So that works out fairly well. All right. Well, before we get to our overall opinions, there's another thing we should talk about. A lot of voice acting in this game here. If you want to actually hear from some of the voice actors, if you take a look back in the podcast feed to my Anime Milwaukee 2024 episode, that one actually has a lot of interviews, 3 or 4 of them, I think, from the Detective Pikachu game, people who are in both this 3DS game as well as the Switch follow-up. I got to talk to them about their roles there, including, I'm pretty sure I have Keith in there. I also have Koi Dao, who did the voice of Tim Goodman in this game, and 1 or 2 others. So, but I think overall the voice acting, this is one of the first games to have a lot of voice acting like that, not just for Pokemon, but for human characters. And I think they did a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm, I agree.
Yeah, everything seems to have worked out fairly well. Obviously, with all the cutscenes, they had pretty good blocking and whatnot. So it seems like that all checks out. The Pokemon voices are about what you would expect there. Not everything is voiced. There's a lot of dialogue that technically isn't. But all the characters, I have no major complaints there. I think, given the material and whatnot, that seems to have all worked out fine. Now, as far as overall opinions, you may have noticed that we got through this discussion pretty quickly, even before editing. And it's not that the music, at least in my opinion, was bad for this one, but certainly from like a radio perspective, I don't know that there was a ton I would have used or will use perhaps on my like radio show, or had this been available during the PIRN era, so on and so forth.
I think that's fair. These are all soundtrack tracks, less commercial radio tracks.
Yeah.
And
And there was very little, if any, of this that was brought over into the movie. Henry Jackman, who did most of the scoring for the Detective Pikachu movie, um, he may have well been provided with some of this, but decided or didn't find a place. And they actually end up using more stuff from. They use the main game theme in the end credits of the movie, and they also use an instrumental and a vocal version of the English Pokemon theme. So they make it more franchise wide than rather than pulling anything from here, which is interesting. Not bad, but maybe not the most like I said. I think one of the more interesting tracks are actually the short ones for the cutscenes, and I would love to see some of those expanded, which I think would be an interesting deal there. So, like I said, it works for the game mechanically and what they're trying to do there, but all right,
which is really all you can judge it on.
I suppose so. We'll have to certainly see when we will eventually cover Detective Pikachu Returns, musically and mechanically. It's in a way it's more of the same of this. It's certainly mechanically to perhaps a fault. I expect that if Creatures does another game in another year or so, that there'll probably be something different. Will not be Detective Pikachu 3, but we'll see about that. But in any case, if you think we missed something, or if you had a wildly different opinion on one of these tracks, or whatever, you can always give us a comment. You can give us an email, pokepress@gmail.com. You can give us a comment on one of these videos if you happen to be watching this on YouTube. And, of course, you can find us on Blue Sky at PokePress. And speaking of Blue Sky, I have a couple things to bring up there. All right. And speaking of Blue Sky, I have a couple of conversations from the last little while that I want to sort of bring up here. So I can look at the fairly certain that. Okay. There we go. Okay. First off, this is a conversation I had with someone named Ethendor Ethendor. I'm not sure exactly how that's pronounced. It's like the moon in Star Wars or something like that. But in any case, this was someone who had done a rewatch on, or done their first watch, I'm not sure which, on Pokemon 2000, the second movie, and was actually pleasantly surprised by it. This person had sort of seen a lot of videos, people talking down. And it's not everyone's cup of tea. I'll absolutely give you that. If you're not interested in some of the plot stuff or the music and visuals, if those don't grab you, I can understand why you wouldn't want that too much. But actually was liked it in some ways better than the first movie, and glad people's memories weren't erased for that one. It talks about trust in Charizard, but the follow-up question I kind of wanted to bring up here is one thing. We're recording this about a month before Legends ZA comes out. I'm very much looking forward to that. And, if someone asked me, hey, is there an arc or a portion of the anime that you think could be adapted into the third or whatever Legends game or something like that? The Orange Islands in the second movie it's pretty much been my pick there. So I asked this individual about that as a possibility. And they mentioned how there's a lot of unique islands, sailing on Lapras, and so on and so forth. And even if the birds are a little different than how they work in the main series games, they could probably still work in that. My impression would be that the events somehow related to the second movie. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Would be sort of the climax of the main story there, with some stuff after it. And I assume you're looking forward to ZA. I assume you played a decent amount of Legends Arceus. What are your kind of thoughts?
I have mainlined so much Legends Arceus. And I'm very much looking forward to ZA. I would love a take on the Orange Islands that was Arceus and ZA inspired. I think that would definitely be something very different because it would be a lot of ocean, which is a terrain that we don't see as much in Legends Arceus, and presumably not in the middle of a cityscape like Kalos. So, yeah, I think there's potential, as you say, the climax of the movie with the three birds could make an incredible game climax. I recovered Pokemon 2000
right.
not too long ago and was commenting like it does not seem like it takes much to set these birds off. It's not that hard to come up with a plot reason to have these birds out of harmony again. There's so much game potential.
There is, yeah, depending on what they want to do there. Now, I did point down one danger I could see, I put in this thread, is that it could be too close to the anime and maybe too predictable. And, we sort of see some of that with you look at the two Legends games. Arceus is a prequel. It takes place 100, 150 years before the events of Diamond and Pearl. ZA is a follow-up. It takes place after X and Y. So we have that aspect of it. So I kind of figure that like there's like three ways to do this game. You either do a prequel, which is set in there, in that area, and so you see some of the places that were shown in like the anime earlier, and you get to see like the original's history of like the legend and where that came from. Or you do a more direct adaptation of the anime, or you do a follow-up story. And yes, I can think of another reason why the birds would fall out of balance, thanks to some DLC that was released a few years ago. So I think they could go any of those three ways, depending on licenses and stuff like that. If they decide to do that for a third game or some other type of game that they could make there.
The costume design on a prequel to the Orange Islands legend with all the costuming that they have in the anime, all those elaborate bird costumes, like there's a very rich well to draw from here.
Yeah, and I'm sure, of course, I always joke about this idea, though. I'm sure IGN will give it a very negative review.
They have not been right about so many of my favorite games, and I will die on the hill that Arceus is one of the greatest Pokemon games ever created, next to Black and White. So,
well, just in case the folks at home didn't get it, that's a reference to their Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire Too Much Water review.
It all depends on how you make the writing on Lapras mechanic.
Yeah, but like I said, I think the idea would be that you would have to explore a bunch of the islands to progress the story and stuff like that. And you'd see some stuff would have to be changed to make it more, workable in a game context. That's where the prequel / sequel angle might become a little bit better, and so on and so forth. And, musically they would have to, obviously I'm one of the big critics of Mewtwo Strikes Back Evolution not having much of anything from the 99 dub score or song-wise, outside of the opening titles. That was a detriment, I think, to that remake. I think it would be unforgivable to an extent with some of the... with either... It doesn't look like there's going to be a CGI remake of the second movie.
Oh, goodness.
But if they did this here, they kind of need to check that off as well. So
I have grown to the point where I can accept, I've watched it enough times that the Japanese version of Lugia's song, like I hear that and I get the same like stirring in my soul that I get from the English do 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 do. So I'm getting there. But yeah, like overall,
commercially, if I were advising the company,
right? Yeah, the music on this game either way needs to be as bulletproof as that movie.
So yeah, and I can see some other ways, but yeah, like I said, I think just because that is a more cohesive arc, and I think there's enough material for a game there versus someone, like I said, people all have their favorites about that like what if they did take part of the anime and make that into the basis for a Legends game, because the Orange Island, the Shimudi Island part of it is very much integrated into the region itself more organically than a lot of the other ones. I think that might be a viable possibility, but right now we're just kind of waiting for ZA and seeing how that one turns out. I'm fairly positive on it, but all right. And for our second little bit of feedback, this is, I guess, a little bit of a trivia thing more than anything else. So Sega made a device, an educational computer called the Pico. I forget exactly when, but basically it was a rework of I think the Sega Master System, or whatever there. I think and so on and so forth. There may have been a more advanced one that was just basically a repackaged Genesis, used for a variety of educational games, particularly in Japan. And there were a couple based, well, on Pokemon, but more specifically based on the anime. And specifically, there's one about like hiragana and katakana, based on Advanced Generation, and it uses in it a chiptune version of Advanced Adventure. And I replied to someone who linked to that. It says, "Fun fact: I helped get a remix of this delisted from ocremix.org by pointing out it came from the anime rather than the game. And I apologize to Will Rock, who did the remix there." And I said, "Yeah, technically this is like composed by Hirokazu Tanaka because this is from the anime, which OC Remix's rules require the music, like if it includes something like, I think GoldenEye music can include the Bond theme, but it still has to be based on a specific level theme from the game. But it has to sort of be a unique arrangement or whatever from there or something like that. Basically, it didn't meet their rules, so it was delisted if you try to find that one. You can find it on YouTube and stuff because it's been re-uploaded and so on and so forth. But Will was very gracious. He says, no hard feelings here. I got more than enough remixes on the website. Although when I did post a comment, he remembers that, and he says he was thinking, if I say nothing, maybe they won't notice.
They always do, my friend.
Yeah. So yeah, if you actually look in like their delisted list on OC Remix, you will see an entry for this. So yeah, like I said, I didn't think he took it personally or anything like that. He put good effort into it. But yeah, because it is based on a song from the anime, so also means you shouldn't do a remix and submit it there for that Pokemon pinball theme based on Aim to be a Pokemon Master. Yeah. So don't do that either.
There are several layers to this story, but I want to go back to what is the purpose of this track? Is it to teach you hiragana and katakana?
That's what the game is. It uses the theme song from the anime. There's like 2 or 3, I think, games that are based on specifically the anime. So this is derived from the anime that's based on the game. So this is the game based on the anime based on the game. Yeah.
So what, to the tune like Akasaka na Hataka?
No, I think it's just like the title screen or a menu theme or something like that.
Okay. I was just like,
no.
That is an incredibly catchy song to use as a great device. Like,
fantastic one there, but. Yeah, so that was a little bit of a foible a ways back that I sort of pointed out there.
Interesting.
So, yeah. All right. Well, so we're continuing through the side games. We have a few more in the Sun and Moon generation, and then we'll take a couple episodes where we'll do some other stuff before getting to the Sword and Shield. Yes, we are getting that close to the present time. Side games. But our actual next discussion is going to be Pokemon Quest. Now, this is a bit of an unusual one structurally, I guess, sort of. So this was originally released as a Switch download title. There's also a mobile version of it. And then, for whatever reason, in China, they got an expanded version that unfortunately is no longer available. But they got an expanded version of it that had more features, more Pokemon, I believe, and stuff like that. But importantly for our purposes, it has music, and we'll definitely be talking about that during our next discussion. And I think you can probably still download this from the Switch eShop if you don't have it, since this was originally a Switch game. You can probably get it from the mobile, device stores as well.
I can look into it. I've honestly never heard of this Pokemon Duplo thing we got going on here. Pokemon
Yes,
Minecraft.
the Pokemon designs are very rectangular prism. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Um, so they took some interesting art liberties with that. And there's a variety of mechanics. We'll also do a game discussion on this. I completed just about everything in there except for a very last bit. And I've been playing through it a little bit recently as well to try and finish that part up. No luck yet, but that will be our next discussion. Until then,
Right.
Anne, thank you very much for being on.
Thank you.
This has been Stephen Reich. All right, folks, thanks.
Don't go away.
Yep, we are going to do our game discussion in just a little bit. We usually stretch our legs. If we did miss any songs, there's a fair bit of music on this one. Like if you look at the whole thing, it's like a couple hours worth of music, and so on and so forth. But a lot of them are very relatively short. Like I don't know if stinger's the right word, but cutscene tunes and so on and so forth. So I will get some water and I'll be right back.
I'll stay here and vamp, I guess. Big news for those of you who don't follow me on Pikapi Podcast or the Patreon. I have relocated my entire life to Florida. After last time I spoke with you, I had relocated my entire life to Canada to take care of my dad. So that's happening. My dad is doing great. So I am off finally chasing some lifelong creative dreams of mine. I've moved to Florida to become my artist, hippie, actor, writer self. I've checked off a bucket list dream of mine in that I now work for a Disney park. I am so jazzed and also so broke right now, but that is what tracing your dreams looks like. Is brokenness but happiness. I was just telling the listeners that I have crossed a item off my bucket list in that I now work for a Disney park.
Oh,
I know. I am nobody's friend yet, but I've made it in. I have a Disney name tag. I have an ID. I can be found in the wild grass.
I knew you had relocated. That's one reason this took a little while, is because Anne was in the
Yeah.
process of moving around a bit.
Still in the process of moving. Look at this mess. But
so I knew about that, but she hadn't told me where she was actually moving to, or other than I knew it was in the Eastern time zone. So
yes, sorry, yeah, I am in Central Florida.
Well, I'll have to see. They do put events there. I have to see what the regional schedule is for the next year and see if I can pop on by there.
Yeah, I gotta check out the convention circuit in this area too. Maybe I can table somewhere and sell some of my Pokemon prints.
Yeah, we should talk about that afterwards. Actually, what we want to do there. But yeah, no promises, folks. But I would like to do another panel with Anne at some point.
That would be fun.
All right, well, we're going to talk about the game mechanics and so on and so forth, and also comparison to the movie, of course, and so on and so forth. So give us a little pause, and I'll do another introduction here. All right, well, with the music covered, now we definitely got to talk about this as a game, and we'll also be, of course, doing a comparison to the movie that came out a few years ago. But let's sort of talk, first of all, about the original premise. You are controlling Tim Goodman, who is this character who is trying to find his dad who disappeared from Rhyme City relatively recently. And you stumble across this Pikachu that you can understand, but everyone else thinks is just a normal Pikachu. I'm not sure exactly when you first heard the premise, when I became aware of that and all that, but I don't know. Anne, what are your sort of thoughts of the underlying idea behind this game as far as the setup?
I like multifaceted, because on the one hand, the mystery of why you can't understand Pikachu and everyone else can't is a little interesting, and I'm not gonna lie, the idea that it's because Pikachu is actually somebody else, not a huge fan of that. But at the same time, it's intriguing. And I do love the idea of humans and Pokemon talking together as peers. Like that's a huge thing I talk about on my podcasts when they get to the level where they can communicate as if they are speaking the same language. So that is super interesting to me. And then I actually play a lot of Gyakuten Saiban Ace Attorney. So the idea of using Pikachu, doing a Pokemon themed Ace Attorney game, very intriguing to me. So the very basic concept of Pikachu going around solving mysteries, I was on board.
Yeah, I think it was the anime who more or less came with the idea that Pokemon could speak with each other, as a convenience for various reasons in there. We see it sometimes, and
That's
of course,
true.
Meowth is a thing there. I think it mostly stems from that area. I don't think
You're right. It's true. The games don't do much until you get to Mystery Dungeon.
Mm-hmm. So, as far as other games kind of like this, I mean, I've played a decent number of like the Professor Layton games, but those are more based around puzzles that don't necessarily have a ton to do with the actual story directly or loosely inspired by it. Whereas this time you're going around asking questions of people in Pokemon to try and says whatever the particular mystery as well as the larger mystery is where you are there.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, there's movement and stuff like that where you have to go around and talk to, like I said, people in Pokemon. You can move from area to area. Each chapter has its own place, set of things there. You do go to a variety of places several times, like the High Hat Cafe, the Baker Detective Agency, which is not in the movie at all. Obviously, they had to cut some stuff down because this was still like a 10, 12-hour game for me. And cutting that down to a movie meant some things had to come out, which we'll talk more about. To be honest, kind of the other main mechanic there are those QuickTime events. We talked about one of the themes where there's a couple times where you're chasing down Keith, this character who's involved with the production and distribution of R. And I thought those were kind of okay. They obviously could have been more complex than they were. Other games have more complex button sequences and so on and so forth. How did you feel about them, Anne?
Well, again, as someone who's played Ace Attorney, like a lot of these felt like they could have gone. Like a lot of the cases, a lot of the gameplay, how you talk to people, the things you can find out, all these things felt like there could have been more. I guess that's true of this chase sequences as well. It's kind of just prioritizing what you want out of it, I guess. Like, is this an action game where it's like, pressing the button at the right time matters, where we want to make the chase sequences more complicated? Or is this more of an intellectual game where we want to make the case more complex and use a lot more reasoning? Is like, yeah, it's kind of like hard for me to judge it right now because it is trying to cater to a very young audience in the sense, whereas like say Ace Attorney usually caters to a slightly older crowd. So it's like you've kind of got to hit that sweet spot of like the case is simple enough that the young people who see Pikachu and want to play it won't get frustrated. And you've got to keep the mechanics of how you solve the case simple enough that they can play and follow. And you've got to have like some element of action with these chase sequences, but you don't want to make them too complex again, because that'll take up like memory or bandwidth or, space on the game. Like, so I don't want to judge it without like sitting in the meeting, and hearing everybody's development perspectives on like why we can or can't do this, because I recognize that it could do a lot more in a lot of areas, but I don't know if I can criticize it for not, if that makes sense.
Now, we'll talk a little bit more about the plot, but we have a comment from DDO33 that I'll try to work in a bit later about some of the plot stuff in there. But let's see. Yeah, and also obviously the QuickTime events, they also break up the gameplay a little bit so that you're doing some other things in there, which is kind of nice. And there are a couple like legit puzzles, like some block pushing stuff, and so on and so forth. So it's not, there's a little, it gives it more variety than it would otherwise. We'll have to see in the Detective Pikachu Returns if they try to broaden that out at all.
And that was kind of cute because it's just kind of a tie back to the main series because like there's never been a main series game where there hasn't been a gym or something where you haven't had to solve a little puzzle at one point. So that's just kind of a nice little way to make it feel quintessentially Pokemon.
Okay, well, as far as the kind of like, let's see, where did I want to go next with that? As far as so those are kind of the two main things. There's a lot of, I guess you could call it interrogations and stuff like that. And at the end of each chapter, you generally have to put some things together and figure out who did the nasty thing in that chapter, and why and how and so on and so forth. And each of those has that. Structurally, like the chapters, actually, when I first started playing this in the first couple chapters, I was not. I won't say this game is the greatest thing ever mechanically, but I the first couple chapters, I feel like this game kind of has two introductory chapters, and that's probably one too many. That like both the first and second chapter, a lot of the action is you going left and right, straight up left and right the whole time. Especially the second chapter, which seems a little odd for the second chapter. You think things would open up a bit more, but that one is actually in some ways more linear than the first chapter even is. And that was kind of dragging on me for a while. It wasn't until I got into like the third chapter and so on and so forth, that I started to get more into it. Like I could see a lot of things that paralleled the movie and stuff like that. But I don't know. Anne, do you think this one sort of builds up and becomes? Did you get more invested, or how did that sort of play out for you?
I mean, I definitely got more invested as time went on, for sure. I will agree with you. The beginning like takes a minute to like really hook you in, and that's unfortunate because when I first played this, I played it as a demo at like a gaming convention. So like I could see a lot of people like starting to play the demo and walking away after a while because they don't have the time, but it hadn't hooked them yet because it's like it just takes a while to get to the point. Or well, not to get to the point, but to get to a point where you're really like, yes, I want to continue playing this. I want to go home and buy this for myself.
But like I said, if I had to say structurally something about this game is to rework those first two chapters to be a little bit more distinct or have more to do and stuff like that. I know you don't want to overwhelm the player right away, but it almost
but you don't
felt
want
like
to railroad them either. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of felt like the second mission actually went down in complexity, which is very strange. Otherwise, though, I found most of the other chapters to certainly be, structurally more interesting. Yes, it was a bit of a slow pace there and whatnot. There are some other breaks in there, like there's the whole auction thing that we talked a little bit about there. So that's kind of an interesting thing where you have to find basically the secret code word to get in there, and so on and so forth. And ideally, it doesn't seem to make much of a difference, but you are supposed to try and like win the two items that are before the R in there, in that black market auction. Underground market. Maybe that's the more correct phrase to use these days, but you get the idea. And so on and so forth. So yeah, not the most diverse play styles. I mean, in the very last chapter, there is a more elaborate quick time-ish event that you have to go through. This is basically I don't know if it's literally a bomb, but it's like a bomb defusal scenario that you sometimes see in a lot of, movies and TV shows and stuff like that. That's sort of where it peaks there in terms of the action element. But, we talked about it a little bit with our song selections, but there's a fair amount of stuff in this game that is not in the movie. And there's a little bit of stuff. They obviously clued folks in to the final resolution there. DDD033 felt that, let me just punch that up on my computer so I can read that nice and clearly. So spoiler alert for both the games and the movie, but the body switching aspect with Tim Goodman's dad, Harry Goodman, and Pikachu sort of being merged together was weird, and it was made even more explicit in the film. So that's kind of the deal there. So that is something they sort of have in common, but there's a number of characters.
It is weird.
that were added, or well, mostly that were like there's no like there are a number of people at the news network or whatever it is. They gave Rhyme in the movie more of a backstory as a city and why it exists, where it is, and stuff like that, which is actually I think quite nice.
Yeah.
Hopefully, some of that is covered in the second game, and that was maybe stuff that they had planned but need to be brought into the movie to make it more coherent. There's some characters that are switched around. First of all, there's no direct Lucy Stevens, Catherine Newton's character, equivalent really in this game that much. I mean, there's sort of one of the reporters on there that you sort of develop sort of a relationship with, but not, she shows up multiple times in there along with some other folks.
Mako and Amelia.
Yeah, they're sort of in that role. Let's see. There's only one Clifford's at the news agency or at the TV studio in this game. I think they kind of repurposed the other guy that you see there, the channel president or whatever it is, sort of reworked them to be family members or something like that for the movie, which I think makes sense and actually helps give the movie a little bit of a different ending than the game does, effectively speaking. A little bit. Just so people aren't totally
not. Are we spoiling this game or?
We will eventually.
Okay.
Let's spoil this point. So in the game, there is the younger Cliffords. There's just the one Cliffords guy. I mean, assumably he's got a father, but that person is not in the game. They're not involved with the TV station, as opposed to the father and son duo that we see in the movie. And the big bad guy behind all the stuff turns out to be Roger Clifford's, who was the younger of the two in the movie. So that's why a lot of folks seeing the movie think, oh, yep, that's him, until you find out later it was really the elder Cliffords who was behind the thing there. You pretty much figure watching the movie that, okay, it's got to be one of these two guys, even if you've never played the game. It's like, what, they're obviously, they're not happy with each other, so they can't be working together. But one of these guys is presumably behind the underlying problem there. And sort of they leverage that into the movie. A lot of the settings aren't really there. The lab is obviously a fair bit different here, where it's a little more benign as just a lab than it is in the movie, where they spice things up a lot for Rita Ora's character and her associates.
Yes.
So there's a number of differences there. Do you think, so you played this game at least for a decent chunk of it before the movie. I did not. I knew the premise, but I did not play the game until after seeing the movie.
It's been a while, but yeah.
Do we have to suss out here, I guess, would either of our experiences been changed? How much so? By that. Now, did you play through the whole game before you saw the movie?
Oh, absolutely not. No.
Okay, so you didn't know the twist about, because I assume if you had played through the whole game and thought, oh, Roger Clifford's, oh, that guy, same name in the movie, must be the guy behind it. Yep. Oh, no. So, yeah, that's sort of the twist that the movie adds in there beyond adding some other stuff. Like, obviously, the Mr. Mime interrogation scene is totally original to the movie, and
brilliant.
Certainly not in this game, although I think they must have given them some details about what was going to be in the second game to fill in some blanks in there. But I'm not sure if I would have liked the movie more or less or the same or what if I had played this beforehand.
Well, it's like, on the one hand, the game plot lends itself so incredibly well to a movie, but at the same time, I think we've discussed this in a lot of ways on the podcast. It's like, I'm generally, whether it's music, whether it's storytelling, I am generally not a big fan of doing the same thing if you can do something different. So I don't know if it would have made my experience better or worse to have played the game all the way through before the movie necessarily, because I still went into that movie having played a little bit being like, this is going to be fun. This is a big swing for Pokemon, by golly, but I'm interested, and I had a great time. There were things that I saw coming, things that I didn't see coming because I played the game, etc., etc. But like, I am always going to have more fun if you surprise me, if you take a slightly different route. So I definitely think, like, in some ways, I feel like this game the movie almost played it a little too safe to the game, and like there are several things that I think they could have deviated further from. One of them being, let's not have Pikachu also be the dad. Triple D 033. I'm with you. You and me needed to be in that writer's room and given some advice because that's a stupid idea.
I think it worked out just fine in the movie, but of course I saw the movie before I played the game. So
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I felt some feelings, but I would have rather done something else.
I suppose. I mean, like neither of us. I assume I don't know what the like. Sometimes with these things, I have rewriting suggestions off the top of my head. This one I really kind of don't. I can think of some ways to actually explain away what they did there in terms of like in story. Like why does in the movie why does he sound like the guy's dad? Well, it's because of course, he thinks he's hallucinating and stuff, and so he thinks.
It's like off the top of my head, like just have him be a Pikachu. Just have him be a Pikachu who, like, thanks to the power of Mewtwo, got telepathy, and now
I
he
don't know.
knows how to human speak. Like that's I don't know.
But I'm just thinking because, of course, when they were separate, they worked with each other, of course, and that's why he sounds like his dad. You know, he never says that,
Yeah.
thankfully, in the movie. That would kind of maybe shatter the immersion a bit. But all right, well, this game did get a sequel in game form. The Detective Pikachu returns on the Switch, and we'll get to that eventually. The movie was supposed to get a sequel and has been stuck. We know now because of some data that was extracted from Game Freak about a year ago that the movie has been stuck in rewrites. Obviously, stuff like the pandemic and the actors and writers strikes didn't help. But given the way the movie resolves, people have said, even people who like the movie said, you can't remove your main hook there. And I'm sure someone while still keeping, Harry and Detective Pikachu as separate entities can totally write a follow-up movie, which might well have some, I apparently there's like a synopsis or something that was also a part of that leak. But I haven't looked at it myself. It might have some stuff that wasn't in the movie that was in this game or the sequel or stuff like that, as well. But
I have a suggestion for keeping them separate entities. Maybe we can just get to know Pikachu, Detective Pikachu, as a Pikachu.
I suppose. I mean, I have. If they were asking me what other characters, I'd have some other ideas as well for folks there. We can go into,
Detective
what
Saga.
happened, but there seems to be a I know there are a number of folks who consider the Detective Pikachu movie. I mean, it was the first critically successful and financially successful in a big way video game adaptations. But there seems to be a crowd now. I don't know if it's just because stuff like Super Mario Brothers, the new one, made over $1 billion, and Minecraft made nearly $1 billion. If that the goalposts have been moved and stuff like that, there's people who say, well, it should have been a Red/Ash movie. We can go into the details of why I think they probably didn't want to do that at the time. And so on and so forth. But there seems to be, despite this movie making $450 to $500 million, seems to be some framing of it as a quote unquote failure, either because the sequel movie hasn't come out and the sequel game didn't sell very well and stuff like that, or they expected much more from the franchise. It's like, whatever. I know that the Detective Pikachu movie was more expensive than, say, the Sonic the Hedgehog movies, just because there's more CGI characters in it. Is probably the main thing there. That's why it did there, but that seems kind of odd to me. I don't think as well as Super Mario Brothers and the more recent the Sonic movies have done. I don't know that they would have done as well as they did if Detective Pikachu had not opened the door, so to speak, if you know what I mean. Being the first wide release video game movie that critics and audiences both thought turned out okay, I do think that there's an underappreciation, at least by critics, of a number of video game movies, whatever their actual problems, or merits may be. I think there was definitely some territorialism involved there.
Yeah, that's fair.
But
yeah, I've not personally heard the narrative that it's been a failure, so I'm grateful that I'm hanging out in a different part of the internet than you. But I definitely do think Pokemon has always been notoriously difficult to take out of its box when it comes to things like adapting it to live action or even doing spin-off things sometimes. Like, even though there's so much potential there, like it always feels like a bit of a risk anytime the narrative storytelling, like the anime, either say starts a new season that doesn't involve Ash, or does something involving Red, or it just takes it out of its box in any way. So I do think in overall the Pokemon live action movie is a success and a surprise. Like, it surprised a lot of people who weren't expecting it to be in any way good. So I definitely think that's enough for the Pokemon company to build off of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I do hope that, obviously there's a Mario movie sequel coming. It's in development. A Zelda movie that's in development. As far as other, Nintendo owned or co-owned properties, Pokemon is a co-owned property for Nintendo.
Mm-mm-mm.
Um, I do hope that there is something there. I do think that maybe their prior practice of having a legendary and or mythical and or several of them and designing a movie around that maybe doesn't work as well, and they should start working from some of the human characters in the franchise. And like, I know the Pokemon are what sells most of the merchandise, but I
They
think
can
from
still be there.
yeah. I have, like I said, I don't expect to be contacted, but I do have at least like 3 ideas for stuff, and hopefully, they have something going there. We've been in quite of a drought with live action or animated stuff for Pokemon, other than the main series and a few specials. Like, we'll get something related to some stuff related to ZA, of course, and so on and so forth. We've been kind of light on that area for a while. So yeah, but as far as this game, quality wise, fine. Not the greatest thing ever. I have a feeling that after Detective Pikachu returns, we'll cover that game. But subsequent to that game, I assume Creatures is probably working on something different, as they're younger age focused. Like the Hey You Pikachu's and PokeParks and Detective Pikachu's within the franchise. I think they're probably working on something different yet again for whatever their next project is. But I think this one worked out okay. Not the
Yeah.
most spectacular thing. It took some risks, and I absolutely respect for that, just like the movie did, based on it.
Well,
And I
didn't
did.
oh, sorry, carry on.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, didn't Detective Pikachu, like, it felt in my mind that it had like this cult following for the longest time, of like kind of in the same way Mystery Dungeon had for a bit. Like, it was this sleeper game. Like, you haven't played Detective Pikachu? It's so cool. It's so different.
Now, it definitely reaches out to a specific subset. I know that there must be, like for every side game, there's a hardcore fan base for it. Um, but I think that this was somewhat successful. I think really the problems with Detective Pikachu Returns, when we'll talk about that, have more to do with the fact that they weren't ready to move to the next platform there, and they were basically forced to. Um,
That
there's
explains
some
a bit.
there's some evidence that the Pokemon Company or some of the people or Game Freak or some of the folks around there underestimated the Switch, and how successful it would be a little bit, and weren't as prepared to move on to it as they maybe should have been. But whatever.
Well, and now we've
Uh,
got the Switch 2 to deal with.
yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what the first. Like, I am hoping that next year. I did stop the recording there. I am hoping that
Oh,
next year we do get some sort of something besides, like, Champions is coming out, I think this fall or very early next year. I'm hoping we get something else to go with it. That is not a re-release, not a remake, but something else. It can be a side game, and they could either do, another mystery dungeon. A new mystery dungeon game would be fun, or it could be. You talked a month or two ago about the possibility of them eventually doing a dedicated Pokemon music game, which would be a lot of fun. Or it could be something totally different. I am totally up for that as well. If you would, stuff like Snap and Let's see. Like I said, the Michigan crossover, like they haven't done too much with that since last year's Worlds, where they put the GBA Red Rescue Team on the service there.
Mm.
We're still waiting to find out when they're going to put the GameCube battling games onto Switch Online expansion pack. We were hoping they might do at
Right,
least
yeah.
one of them at Worlds. Um, let's talk while we're here a little bit. We're still doing this stream. Thank you to
Oh,
folks who came
yes.
in. Have you seen some of the marketing stuff for ZA? They haven't done too many like actual normal advertisements, but just this week they put out a little. It's not really a YouTube short, but it's like a little video of a couple people talking about how much they like Malamar. Who people?
Oh, is that why like so much of my feed lately has been like respect for my buddy Malmar or something?
Something
Oh,
like that. I've been using one
that's
actually. I've been
funny.
doing more of the raids in Scarlet and Violet, especially since the update in the Switch 2, where it performs a bit better. Um, and I've created up the contrary Malamar is actually very good in a lot of different raid setups
Okay.
because of its ability to you can like if the raid Pokemon buffs itself up with a lot of stats, you can put a skill swap it to make it those actually hurt it, or stuff like that. So on different, depending on the weaknesses and stuff like that. So I've got a couple of them. One that's physically defensive, one that's specially defensive.
Interesting.
Um,
I'm low key have a predisposition to hate Malmar just because of that one anime episode where it made Pikachu fight Ash. And like that is the way I play these games is I'm very easily influenced. So there's a part of me that's been like low key, you can't trust Malmar. But now I know he's getting a push
yeah.
lately.
In any case, so it'll be interesting to see. We know that Victory Bell is getting a mega. We've seen that one.
Oh
Halucha
god.
has gotten finally the Luchador treatment, having just put out the Pokken tournament where Halucha does not get to be a playable character thing there. Having this in there was nice. So that was a neat thing. They're doing an event in Mexico City with a wrestling organization there.
Oh,
They've also got some stuff, I think, next weekend in Paris, which, duh.
yeah, yeah.
I'm still crossing
So
my fingers for that Dua Lipa "Don't Change Elemental Monkeys" cover. But
keep trying. Keep putting that out in the universe manifesting.
so we'll see. Maybe that'll happen. I don't know. But yeah, so that's sort of the thing there. So things are definitely coming together. Obviously, the next time we do one of these, we'll have either be very close to the release or just past the release or whatever of ZA. So that'll be a fun one. But thank you very much to everyone for coming.
Yes, thank you.